guests. For your safety and the safety of others, please wear a mask at all times throughout the session.
Welcome, everybody. It's good to have you here for our session of the World Majlis. Today's session is the Innovation Nation, part of Innovation Week, or Innovation Month for the UAE, actually. And we will be talking about creating innovative societies to solve humanity's greatest challenges. I will introduce the panel to begin with. On your right, you have, and again, so I don't butcher any names, make sure you get it right. We have Arun Sundararajan. Close enough? Yes? He's a professor of technology, operations, and statistics at NYU. Next to him, we have Oscar de Montigny. Can you please say it?
No worries. Since I was a little child.
Yeah. How do you actually say it?
De Montigny.
De Montigny. Perfect. Oscar has a very interesting title, Ideator of Human Knowability Vision in Italy. Very cool. We have Professor Javier Garcia Martinez, who's the president of the International Union of Pure and Applied Chemistry in Spain. Alia Al-Mazroui, to my right, your left, program director at the UAE Research Program for Rain Enhancement Science, UAE. So she's been making it rain, literally, over the past month. Garanga, who's the founder of the Atelier for Design Thinking Academy in Rwanda. And Yoav Fisher, head of tech innovation at Health IL Israel. I'm Saeed Saeed. I am your moderator today. I'm the Science and Tech Advisor at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation here in the UAE. And really, last but not least, we have Mark Galabert, who is the Secretary of State for Economic Diversification and Innovation in the government of Andorra. I will start the session with a very generic question. To get the juices of the conversation flowing, I will start with Arun. If you can tell us what innovation means to you.
Well, first off, thank you for the invitation. I'm so delighted to be here at Expo. I actually visited the site 4 years ago in 2018 when it was under construction. And I could sort of sense what a great event it was going to be, so it's wonderful to sort of close the circle here. I mean, to me, innovation has three phases that, not all of which necessarily get the same importance. I mean, there's certainly the ideation phase, like, the creation of something new, the idea of how to do something new. Then there's the second phase of implementation or execution, where you sort of convert that idea into the something new, like, sort of something that actually works. And then there's a third phase of communication and scaling, where the innovation is then sort of spread around, like, sort of the country, the world, the city. And so to me, innovation shouldn't just focus on the ideation and R&D phase, should also sort of give equal importance to the execution and then to the scaling phases, because that's how the world can, sort of derive value from innovation. And, I have a lot of thoughts on, like, sort of what we might do to sort of address each of these three phases. But in our conversation, a few minutes ago, I was, bringing up the example of Thomas Edison, who we all think of as sort of like, one of the historically great innovators of all time. I mean, and Edison's genius was really in the third phase, in the scaling communication of, like, things that had been ideated and to some extent executed by some other people. One might argue that Steve Jobs was much more of an innovator in stages 2 and 3 rather than stages 1. And so it's, I think it's central as we sort of shape the discussion about how do we foster innovation, what leads to innovation, how can governments promote innovation, that we spend some time thinking about not just phase 1, but phase 2 and phase 3 as well.
And also who gets credit for that innovation as well.
Yes,
so is
well,
it the idea creator or is it the commercializer?
Yeah,
but we'll get to that.
Yeah, historically it seems to be the latter, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Oscar?
Yes, good question, and thanks for inviting me today. I feel home. Since I heard the music when we entered. Well, talking about innovation is quite interesting because on one side, it sounds like talking about something necessarily new. On the other side, we always invented or did innovation since ancient times. Just looking at the history of humans, we could find many, many references. To me, I like to study the meaning of the words when I have to talk about something that is in common with others, because I don't like to fight about the meaning. And on my vocabulary, I was looking at it before I was leaving. By innovation, the vocabulary said to alter the established order of things to do new things. So a very literally meaning, okay? Which is very easy. The problem of innovation is that those who are asked to alter the established order are the same who establish the order. So being innovative is absolutely not natural. Because once we find a comfort zone, that's fine. Because this is being human. So being innovative is a natural approach to life. This is my first, let's say, tip, okay? Then I believe there are three different levels of innovation. There is the incremental innovation, the exponential innovation, and the disruptive innovation. So when we talk about an incremental and or exponential approach, we still remain in a kind of common days, okay, common times. When we talk about disruptive innovation, then you need courage, you know, you need heart, you need a vision. And I believe that these times are asking us to be disruptive. Disruptive doesn't mean destroying anything, just evolving something, ex-volver, to move from a place to another one. And my last tip is, I don't believe in innovation itself. I don't trust innovation itself because I don't trust humans, okay? Looking at our history, we can find our own answers. I believe in innovation when the innovation is led by principles, values, and humanity. So to me, so I go to the human ability vision, a good innovation is only an innovation led, guided, oriented by principles, offered by the principles of sustainability. Sustainability, to make it easy, could be also considered the 70s SDGs, and we can't forget that under the 70s SDGs, we have 169 different topics. So it's a very wide scale of references. So innovation itself could be even dangerous if it is led by sustainability, and by sustainability we know it's a matter of gender equality, it's a matter of water access, it's a matter of health, it's a matter of education, it's a matter of many topics, then innovation could be something really interesting for us. But sustainability, which is one of, I would say, the main topic of Expo, I hope to be fine, has to be enforced, empowered by an innovative approach. Otherwise, it's just an amazing talk, but nothing effective, nothing concrete. So this is the combination of the two, which is innovability. To innovability, I added, and I reached the end, a third dimension, which is the human centricity. Whatever is innovative, whatever is sustainable, has to start from humans and has to produce an effect on humans, a positive impact. So the combination of the three drivers, innovation, sustainability, and human centricity, reach the point of human ability. So I wish a world where any organization, profit, not profit, for profit, on an individual scale, large scale, medium-sized scale, will be led by the principle of human ability, which is nothing different from our history. We always invented something and did something innovative. Your country knows very well what sustainability is because you know how to live where nothing exists. And the human centricity has to be the main principle. So to me, innovation doesn't exist itself. It's just a combination of the three.
Very interesting. What's wrong about your history? The Roman Empire was very innovative.
What's wrong with?
The history, you said you don't trust people because of historical
No, I
context.
don't. I mean, I believe in good people. I believe that humans are good, naturally good. Okay. Then I wonder what happens.
Well, I appreciate the academic approach. I think...
what happens then,
I think you actually brought up a very interesting point, which is a lot of people try to be disruptive. You know, they ask, CEOs ask employees, we have to have disruptive innovation in the way we do business. But then when you come up with ideas like, no, this is not the way we do business. We've been doing it for 30 years, we know. So
yeah, because profit is one of the few results, but
Yeah.
the impact itself is the main result. And by
Exactly.
impact, we can consider only something that brings prosperity, not richness. Prosperity. I mean, prosperity contains richness. Richness doesn't necessarily contain prosperity.
Agreed.
Prosperity is something shared. Richness, not necessarily.
Thank you. Professor?
Okay, first of all, thank you for the invitation. I also feel at home. I feel in my own pavilion, the pavilion of Spain. I'm really pleased to be with all of you. I arrived here to Dubai a few days ago, so I had the opportunity to visit a few pavilions here in the Expo. And I realized that there are two topics that are in every single pavilion: sustainability and innovation. Why innovation? Because every country wants to create jobs, wealth, opportunities, and we have all identified that innovation brings that. So it's quite surprising when you see 190 countries represented in a small space that all of them want to portray themselves as innovative. So there is something there about innovation that seems to be important. And in innovation, of course, there is wealth and there are jobs, but also it's our way to solve our biggest problems: climate change, COVID, water scarcity. We need a new generation of scientists who are committed to discover the solutions we need for the huge threats that we have in front of us. When you introduced to me, you said I'm the president of the International Union of Pure and Applied Chemistry. That's the international organization that governs chemistry. We are doing three things that are critically important for the topic of today. The first thing, every year we identify those technologies that scientists think that they are key to solving our main issues. And that's important. We need to start listening to scientists. We keep talking about innovation and technology, and very few times there is a scientist in the room. And that's a mistake, because those are the ones who really understand not only that particular technology, but also the risks and the
I
opportunities.
think because scientists can be depressing sometimes. It's just problems, problems, problems. So I think what Aaron
Maybe
was
that
saying...
comes from your experience with your father. I think you're bringing some...
The applications of the solutions, I think, is what's missing. You're absolutely right, though.
So science is not simple, and I understand when we talk to scientists, sometimes they are not giving us the silver bullet that we always want. So the problems are very complex. And by not inviting scientists because they are boring or because they don't know how to speak in a setting like this one, we are not helping. But I agree with you on one point, which is scientists also don't want to be invited in these kind of talks. They feel more comfortable in the ivory tower, in the labs. Yeah. And that's why we are now making an effort, a significant effort, to be in these kind of forums and bring the voice of scientists. Because we need the people who actually do understand the technologies, and also we need a new generation of scientists who feel that they can contribute to big problems. So they need to be invited. The other thing we are doing is precisely creating the educational tools to create this new generation of scientists who feel that, yes, maybe they are not going to be very well paid, maybe they are not going to be the most popular guy, maybe they are going to perceive as boring, but they are going to bring the solutions we need. So we need to empower those young, brilliant boys and girls that we are missing. And the other thing we need, and that's the other thing that IUPAC, this organization, is actively doing, is global cooperation. That's what we need, international organizations. Cooperation is missing. You know, when I was visiting Expo, I was feeling that I was in the make-believe world. Because this is beautiful. Every country that you visit is so welcoming. And you see the news, and they are so depressing. There is so much tension now in the world. Yeah. Let's be clear. So we need more international cooperation. And that's one thing scientists do very well. We cooperate. This year, is the International Year of Science for Sustainable Development. All the international unions, the main academies, all the scientific societies are working together, not only to create the solutions we need, but also to be in this kind of setting so we can listen to the scientists and have a more inspiring future to our next generation of young scientists. We need that brilliant minds, not to create more apps for our phone. We need brilliant minds to create solutions for our world.
True. And I just want to say I have the hugest respect for scientists. My father is a scientist. My sister is a scientist as well.
You have an issue with your father.
I think I do. We actually here in the UAE have had this drive to create a more open approach for young children to go into STEM fields with the Mars mission, with the space agency. These are projects that have been invested in heavily by the government so that young children and kids can look up to astronauts and think that that is a viable career. So I definitely appreciate and would like to have more scientists in the world. Alia?
Yes. First, I'd like to thank you for being here today in this diverse panel. It's really very interesting to look into other perspectives in innovation. To me, in my niche field, innovation is a main pillar. We look at it from the beginning till the end. We look at it with all of its phases, since starting with the ideas and looking for the innovative ideas here and searching for it worldwide, reaching or moving into experimenting the technologies that comes out and reaching in a point where we have a tangible result and scaled up to be used in our real operations in real world. For innovation, how we look at it, and what we really focus on always, that we have two main points. It's really very important for us to reach this point. Is focusing on the knowledge and technology transfer in this whole cycle, and as well putting a lot of efforts in international collaborations. We, again, I really agree in this point that collaborating here, this sort of collaborative innovation will help a lot in contributing and help in solving a lot of global challenges like climate change or water scarcity on our side. So it's very important in this. Now, any society has the potential to innovate and create. And the key here of unlocking this potential is the conditions that are created by its leaders. Here in the UAE, we are very lucky, and we are blessed to have this the visionary leaders who strongly believe in embracing and investing in emerging technologies and novel solutions that at the end come and you reach a point where you solve global challenges here. And this helps us a lot and reach with the UAE. I can say that UAE now is such a test bed that at the UAE Research Program for Enhancement Science, it paved the way a lot for us to align our objectives with the 10 principles of the UAE 10 principles for the coming 50 years, for the next 50 years. And this is very important for us to reach in a point where really we focus on innovation and we find out at the end potential outcomes that works.
No, I think it's a breath of fresh air to see that we are looking at applications of technology, applications of scientific discovery it's all good and well to have the theoretical component of science per se, but it's nice to have an institutionalized way to bring that into actual applicable technology and
Sure, and we are strongly pushing for that. When it comes to our, when we select the proposals that we work with for the coming 3 years or the coming years, we always put in mind this point and how it will be applied later on, and we make sure that it has, looking into this innovation part and the application part as well at the end. This is very important for us to make sure that we reach in a point where there is a technology transfer here.
Great, thank you. Amin?
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation, and I'm really glad to be here, and very excited to see the conversations that you've curated over the past few years. Innovation to me means really simple things. It's the freedom to be able to make mistakes and learn from them. The freedom means it's how you create a social infrastructure that allows people to think freely, to be able to come together. So I mean freedom in the sense of in terms of the social experiences that you can facilitate. Making also requires participation from everybody, as you were saying. So you need scientists, educators, different parts of the society to come together. And to be able to see how people are making things. Learning is an important part because every single thing we do, we are learning from that. So you can't tax mistakes too highly. So I hear what you were saying about being afraid of innovation being a scary thing because people are afraid of making mistakes, disruptors and things like that. Actually, so we need to create better environments where mistakes are encouraged, as long as we learn from them and they can inform the next stage of evolution. So innovation for me really means that ability to create, to have the freedom. It's a privilege. Not every society, country has the freedom to think freely, the ability to bring different people to the table to make things, and then the capacity to also observe what they're making. Because sometimes you make things, but there's no one really monitoring what once a decision is made, it's right. So you need to be able to go back, and innovation means being able to go back, look at what you've made and say, oh, I think this one we got it wrong. We can do it better, or we can do it differently. So, and as you're making things also, you learn more in the making. You can sit in the lab all you want, you can sit in a boardroom all you want and create a perfect strategy. But a lot more learning comes when you start to actually apply things. So being able to plan it deliberately, to learn from an innovation, to learn from the things you're doing, it's very key. And then lastly, being able to really honestly report and analyze the mistakes. Because at the same time, if people who are innovating feel like they can't report the innovation didn't solve the problems the way, or created more problems than we're supposed to solve, and then they don't become very honest in terms of their analysis. But if you encourage the fact that any data that comes out of this process is important, is useful, so people understand that innovation is this really trial and error thing, and that's okay, because that's how we live. That's a lot of greatest innovations in the world have happened as a mistake. We suffer from them, we learn from them, we evolve, and then we share the data. So that for me it's really how I understand innovation, how I like to think of innovation.
Yeah, I think it's one of the biggest barriers to innovation is the fear of making mistakes. But you're absolutely right. A lot of the greatest innovative leaps that we've had as a human species were from failures and then learning from them as well. Yeah. So it's a good point. Yoav?
First of all, thank you. As Arun said, it's great to see everyone in person. It's great to see you guys in person after so long. On this panel of disruption and innovation, I'm going to start off by saying something disruptive, which is that I cannot stand the word disruption. And the reason is because I define innovation in a different sense, right? I want to define innovation differently from successful innovation, right? And successful innovation to me is the process of integrating something new, right? So something new doesn't have to be technology. It can be a new business unit. It can be a joint venture. It can be a new marketing channel. It can be whatever, right? There's this kind of inherent default in our day and age when we think about innovation that we think about technology, which I don't think is necessarily true. Like in my world of healthcare technology, tech for tech alone seldom is the factor that leads to successful integration, right? And those startups, at least, who are successful, or the healthcare organizations who are successful, are the ones who deeply understand the non-technical aspects of it. The second part of that statement that's really critical is this process of implementation, right? And I want to focus on that word process, right? It is unbelievably complex to take an idea and to instill it into public use. Again, just from my world, I see countless startups who are developing things without a deep understanding of workflows and processes and healthcare economics and regulation. And I will go so far as to say that I see countless investors who are investing for tech, for the sake of tech, without understanding healthcare economics and so on and so forth. So for me, the discussion of disruption or innovation without any kind of connection to the actual, addressing the complexity of it, and that to me is where the innovation really can do magic, right? It is by bridging this ideation and kind of this opportunity of solutions or perceived solutions and addressing the complexity of integration. And that to me is where that's my issue with this word disruption. I see innovation as something that really needs to be, I don't want to use the word methodical, but it needs to be more calculated, and it needs to be more holistic, and it needs to be more formalized.
Yeah, I think the definition really changes about what it means to innovate, especially in the healthcare field, where the expectation is incremental innovation versus, and I hate to use this example, but it's out there, Viagra was actually a heart medicine.
And was repurposed.
The business aspect or innovative way to do the business with that specific medication is to change its purpose.
Look, and there are successful cases, like you guys redid your entire healthcare infrastructure recently, right? I was speaking to, I forget who from Abu Dhabi specifically, with about how you guys went through the process of rebuilding everything in order to create a situation where you can build applicable uses on top of that. That is complex. Think about how many individuals need to be involved, how many different governmental entities just here alone need to write off and have buy-in in order to create a new infrastructure for healthcare in the Emirates.
Yeah. There's so many ways to approach it, and I think we shouldn't get stuck up on the technological aspect of it as well. Mark? You're still with us?
Yeah, thank you. Do you listen to me well?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, okay. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. For those who don't know, Andorra is a very, very small country in the Pyrenees in Europe, bordering France and Spain. So special salutation to our neighbors in the Spanish pavilion. And I will try to bring the political side of how to promote innovation, because to us, innovation is a constant, or has to be a constant way to transform our economy, to add value and to maintain our competitive advantages. I'm very, I do agree a lot with the professor at the NYU saying that innovation has three phases, and actually for a very small country, and I will try to put in context how small we are. Actually, my whole country can go into the Barcelona football team stadium and the whole country can be there, and our public budget is lower than the Barcelona football team budget as well. So you can imagine how small we are. So in order to promote innovation, we need to bridge those three phases that the professor was speaking about, and we thought that we are in a great need to diversify our economic model, bringing innovation into the table. Andorra historically has been very focused on trade, also on tourism. We are very small, but we receive 8 million tourists a year, so we are the more intensive in terms of touristic per capita country in the world, if we do not take into account the Vatican City. So we have seen with the pandemic that if there is not a flow of people coming every week or every weekend to ski in our mountains or to hike our mountains, it's very difficult for us to maintain our GDP and our GDP per capita. So we decided, and it's a great bet from the government, to diversify our economic model, bringing innovation and digital economy into the table. So regarding these three phases, being a small country is very, very difficult to have the institutions to do this basic or R&D research. And it's also very difficult to spread the innovation into a very big market, because our market is not very big. So we try to specialize in this second phase of innovation, where you need to put this new idea into production and try it very and fail very fast in order to be able to spread it. So we like to think of our country as a living lab for innovation, where multiple purposes and multiple startups can bring their knowledge and talent, try their products and services, and then spread the innovation to the world from our home. Is it also true that we need alliances here, because we are not able to do it alone, and I'm sure that most people in the stage today did not know Andorra prior of that, so it's always good to have good friends in the way. So this is why, for example, we established some strategical partnerships, for example, with the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in Boston. We also have a partnership with the Israel Institute of Innovation. Mr. Fisher is a representative here. We were at Israel in November to do a training on innovation, and we believe that for us, it's a way to promote our economy into the future. And of course, in the field of sustainability and ethics, we cannot afford to not being focused on sustainability when applying innovation. 90% of our country is forest, and nature. So it's a matter of being in the country for the next, 1,000 years, for example. So I believe that this way of approaching how innovation can shape our economy for the future, it's a good approach into how to shape also societies and try to solve our local problems with global solutions.
Yeah, I will say you guys are already doing well as a civil servant with the title that you have. The government of Andorra is already on the right path, I would say. I guess I'm left to say what my definition of innovation is, and to me it's a very simple one. It is finding a way to do something differently that is either more efficient, more effective, or has a bigger impact, which is the same as more effective, so never mind that. The problem that I see with innovation as it stands now is the incentivization of innovation. I think there is a huge conversation to have about who bears the brunt or the cost of implementing and actually applying, like we do here, the innovative technologies or the innovative scientific discoveries, or even methodologies and new ways of doing business. I will open the question for everybody here, so whoever wants to.
But before we get to that, I was wondering if I could just react to a couple of things.
Of course, yes, by all means.
I mean, because it's fascinating the way that, collectively, many people in the group have brought up a couple of the challenges in sort of scaling innovation and seeding innovation, and you mentioned disruptive innovation. Oscar mentioned exponential, and Yoav talked about his distaste for sort of the word disruption. I remember when I was a kid, the school teachers would always call my mother and say, "Mr. Sundarajan, your son is being disruptive in class." And she jokes sometimes that was a prediction of the fact that I would now be doing what I'm doing now. But it's interesting because that's become the language of innovation, right? I mean, if you think about the examples, I mean, you talked about sort of interplanetary travel, going to Mars, these sort of sort of huge goals that we have to sort of motivate people. And often, the goals may not be revolutionary, but they could be easy to understand. Sort of Alia's innovation is easy to explain. It's that I'm going to make, I'm going to create technologies that make it rain, right? But if you come back to Javier's point, and you think about, there was a philosopher of science, Thomas Kuhn, who wrote this celebrated book about 50 or 60 years ago, The Structure of Scientific Revolutions. Yep. And there were lots of brilliant things he said in this book, but the one that I think was most compelling for this discussion is that a vast majority of science is not this kind of innovation that we talk about, this kind of breakthrough, radical, sort of, most of science is boring. It's normal, sort of sort of solving little puzzles and sort of incremental. And so I think, from a society's point of view, if the vision of innovation is sort of big and radical, and the tech companies have put this sort of idea that every breakthrough will be big and will be sort of life-changing into our culture, I think it's going to become more and more of a challenge over time to reconcile that with the reality of science. Through history has always been, the scientists we talk about are the breakthrough scientists, but a vast majority of scientists don't do breakthrough things on a day-to-day basis, right? So that was sort of one thought. I mean, and a second thought, just really quickly, was about sort of grassroots, thinking about grassroots innovation, right? Creating grassroots society. And, and then Amin was talking, sort of earlier, before the panel started about, sort of the libraries and the coffee shops and these sort of public spaces that he creates for sort of grassroots innovation. And it feels like there's, digital technology has created such an opportunity for us to take innovation into the crowds. We need the physical spaces as well. I mean, I feel like Airbnb, for example, has in some ways, under my definition of innovation, taken innovation into the grassroots in the tourism business. So it's not as if the tourism business, there are probably lots of people in Andorra who could be innovators in tourism through, a platform like Airbnb. And I think what holds countries back often is often the lack of spaces beyond the scientists. But it's also another point that Amin brought up, which was the culture of failure and risk-taking, right? I mean, there's so many experiments are successful when you don't get a positive result. But there are some countries where there's I think America has a tolerance for teachers' kids that it's okay to fail in class, through middle school and high school. I think India, where I grew up, has changed from the time I was a kid and now, from being a country where failure was less tolerated to failure being a country where failure is more tolerated, and that has accompanied an explosion of entrepreneurship. But if you sort of contrast a country like Japan with a country like the United States or the EU, and I know I'm doing what we discussed of like, sort of not stopping talking, right? I mean, I can see that,
No, please,
sort of finish your point, smile from the moderator. But, I feel like, these 2 points, right? I mean, like, sort of how do we reconcile the reality of science with like, the fact that, the popular culture thinks of innovation as breakthrough and radical and big. And how do we take it into the grassroots with the right culture of being able to fail that doesn't sort of come from the research universities, but comes from, sort of introducing it in middle school and in high school.
The reason why I'm smiling is because you're hitting so many points that I want to
Yeah.
touch upon, and then you move to
the
something else.
That's the
So I'm
trouble
like,
of going
okay.
first. You listen to everybody else.
And part of good listening is to let go of whatever you want to say and move on, but I can't. So I think one of the things, and I will open this up again, the crux of the issue here, as you mentioned, Airbnb, right? And here it's innovation for profit's sake, which is totally understandable. It's happening all over the place. Whenever someone sees an opportunity to make some money, they will obviously fail, and fail again until they succeed and make that money.
Fail fast.
Yes, exactly.
Fail
They will
fast.
fail
One of
very
the main
fast.
rules.
They will go through all the iterations of a specific model to get to a point where they have innovated and become millionaires. Now, that is not necessarily what I'm interested in. That's fine. People can get rich. I'm not a hater. I'm not jealous. What I'm interested in is how do we get to a point where we're innovating for well-being. We're innovating for societies that are better for the people that live in them, not just for a select few that will make money off of it. I understand that in order to incentivize innovation from that perspective, you need to change the narrative, package it in a way that, hey, listen, if you do this, you're going to cut costs, you're going to make more money, your bottom line is going to be affected. But how do you get to a point, and like you said before, we're thankful to be in this country with the leadership that does not look at the bottom line necessarily when they are implementing innovative strategies and methodologies. They are looking at my well-being, her well-being, and the people that are living in this country. But when you look at the global scale, you do not have that room for innovation for humanity's sake, innovation for the climate change issues, innovation for marine biodiversity. So how do we get to a stage where we are actually incentivizing that somehow? And this is where, I mean, I think you have something to say there.
Many things. So
yes, many things. Please.
Sometime. Thanks, because you gave me a few key thoughts. A little bit of the background, because I want to be very clear. I've been working in the financial industry. I'm still working in it for 22 years now. I've been the chief marketing officer of one of the biggest banks in the country. Now I'm leading the innovation and sustainability and value strategy department. And we realized that connecting the three is very unique, but very effective. This is my professional experience. On the other side, as a consultant, since I was traveling the world, sharing some ideas, after being asked many times, what could I do for my organization, I had the chance to be also a consultant. So I also sit on the other side, giving advices, okay? Supporting organization, profit, no profit, governative. And then I had an experience in the academic world. So these are my three perspectives. What I realized is that on the three sides, because in here you have to spend your time and your project with your colleagues. On the other side, you're offering a product and a service. And then in the academic world, you're offering a view, a theory, also practical approaches. I realized that there is a very defined path to walk. The entry level are the legacies. If you don't break the legacies, you can't do any disruptive innovation. It can be only incremental, same time, double production,
You're making him cringe
half
again.
Production,
Disruptive.
half time.
Don't use that.
Then there is the exponential, 1 hour per 10, 10 per, 20 per, and then there is the disruption. To enter the disruption level, you have to break the legacies, rules, laws, whatever. obviously respecting the law, but you have to break something that was existing, to alter the established order of things, to do something new. Then the second step are the organizational assets. Because if you don't redesign the assets, it's not going to work. You're trying to bring something new into something old. You don't have the path, you don't have the way to work. Then there are the project master plan, because then the assets have to lead the new ones, the new projects. Otherwise, you will have old projects in new assets, organizationally speaking. So, legacies, organizational assets, project master plan, then budget, because if you have money, but you didn't do the rest before, you don't know how to use that money. You're going to lose that money. Not failing fast, because when you fail fast, you learn, okay? Then time, because if you have money, but you don't give time to your projects, because the owner, the CEO, or whoever doesn't have time because it's just, once a while, it's not going to work. Then people, because if you don't have the right people, new ones or old ones, but regenerated, and now it's a matter of generations, in science, in for-profit organization, in government, it's a matter of people, the right people in the right place. Old ones are fine, but they have to regenerate themselves, their mindset. Otherwise, it will be always the same. I know how it works, because I've been doing that for years.
Yep.
But the world has changed extremely fastly without giving us the opportunity as individuals to regenerate ourselves. It's a matter of culture, it's a matter of education, We didn't have time this time. So, legacy and all the levels, it's a matter of culture. Innovation is basically a matter of culture. And since ancient times, innovation always had to do something about social relationships in between, among humans. Very last thing, but I think it's very effective. Okay, later.
Please.
Too many people laughing when I said the very last thing. So.
Please.
Okay, I got it. Shut up.
Please, Oscar, go ahead.
I'm
curious.
The next
now
round.
I'm curious. I'm not going to let it go.
Okay. This is not my perspective, but I was told by a guy I went to listen to. And he said once, Oscar, the three main innovations of humanities? I said, wow, tell me. He said, fire, will, and the web.
And
the web.
The weapon.
The web.
Okay.
Internet.
The web.
Internet, okay?
Internet.
And they asked, why? He said, fire, before we decided how to use this element, the story was told that females used to go, under the volcans to take this element from, okay? We were living as nomads, all of us just by ourselves, alone, okay? Then, thanks to the fire, we could close ourselves into caves, repairing from coldness, safe from the beasts, okay? We started a social life. And we share our lives with people, or with others, that were enemies until the day before, hunting in the same area, Okay. And that is when everything started. Around the fire, we could cook the food, having
more
a longer
nutrients
life,
from the meat, yes.
Then the wheel. Someone started to move from their cave to other places, thanks to the fact that they could not just walk anymore, but moving faster, okay? And then internet. What happened? Why these are the three main innovations? Because thanks to these three entry points, we had the chance to share experience with others. And thanks to the combination, thanks to the meetings with something different from the established order of things, we could evolve. Facing each other, asking each other, wondering, how can you do it? It's a matter of collaboration. Expo, yes. I would say it's a matter of co-opetition. This is another keyword to me of the future. We need to compete in order to go fast. But the paradigm can't be anymore mors tua, vita mea. It has to be vita tua, vita mea. Okay? So we have to compete to go fast, because the competition makes us faster. But then we have to collaborate, because we are all interconnected. It's a matter of sustainability. We realize that we all live in just one great web. So I can't afford anymore just to look for an advantage just for me, okay? That's the collaboration. Collaboration and competition, the merge, it's competition, which is marvelous, okay? We don't have to be just only friends and collaborate itself.
I want to stop you there and thank you. Thank you for justifying my job, because science diplomacy is what I do. So it's about bringing people together to enhance scientific collaboration.
It's fine. Yes. Nothing bad with that.
We were competing about who had most or the biggest rate of vaccine percentage for our population. You won, granted, you won, but...
At the beginning,
yes.
And I think you guys are actually now ahead.
We're ahead now?
I think you're ahead. I think you're ahead.
Competition, you see?
Yeah.
Would you like to give your 2 cents?
Yeah, sure. I would like to be a little bit more practical now and bring a few issues here that are worrisome. The first thing I want to say is we keep talking about innovation, but we have less and less scientists. Young people doesn't want to go to the lab and make these discoveries. That's one concern, and especially with women. We have an issue here. We don't have the best minds thinking about how we are going to solve these big problems. That's one thing I want to put on the table. The other one is we have a very technological society. We keep talking on innovation, but our societies know very little about those technologies, about science.
I agree.
And then manipulation. You know, what happened with a society if they need to vote about something specific that they don't know about? How people are going to decide on their own future, on topics that they have no clue about. That's another very important in terms of the quality of our societies and our democracies. The other thing I want to say is that today, doing research is not a luxury. It's a matter of national security. Right. Because if you don't create your own vaccines, you need to go to the market to see who wants to sell them to you. And if nobody wants to send them solutions, what's going to happen? And that brings the last point, which I think is the most important one. Innovation and technology can create inequalities because not everybody can innovate in the same way. How we are going to create this cooperation, and I understand your point about competition, which I also support, but how we are going to create that cooperation that is needed to make sure that if a few can innovate, everybody is going to benefit from that.
That's the prosperity I was saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think those are the main challenges. We keep talking about innovation, like if everybody could innovate, everybody could benefit from this. And the reality is that we have less and less scientists. The salaries are very, very low everywhere around the world. In some part of the world, women cannot actually study science, which is a major problem. And then we have this issue about poor countries not being able to access those technologies. You were talking before about who is going to pay for this, how we are going to access these technologies. I think that's the real conversation. I said at the beginning that I had the opportunity to go to visit a lot of pavilions. Everybody was talking about innovation, like if that was something that it was on the market for everybody. Not all the innovations are going to be on the marketplace. Some of them are going to be a matter of national security, are going to be a competitive advantage that people are not going to be ready to share. That's the real problem.
Agreed.
So I want to get back to what you were saying, because you were asking about the question about what can, as a governmental level, right? Because I agree with you all. There's clearly an incentive for the private sector to innovate. It creates differentiation, et cetera, competitive advantage, et cetera. The government does have a specific role. It's up to every country to decide how they want the government to intervene or not. But here's a wonderful example, same in Israel, where a certain aspect of innovation was deemed to be a public good, right? And there's certain things that a government can do. A government's not beholden to quarterly earnings per share, right? A government can take a very long-term view. A government does not have to actually, quantify the ROI of something in the future, which I think is exactly that point of where can the government actually start to work. And there's a whole other discussion about how you can collaborate with the private sector to do it, right? to me personally, I see, for example, our Israeli Innovation Authority in Israel, which dumps millions of dollars into R&D. The probability that one of these things will be successful is nil. The probability that I will get returns from it because it's my tax money is even smaller. But the government deemed it as a long-term public good, right? And the fruits of it will happen at some unquantifiable point in the future, which in a weird way gets back to what you guys were saying about iterative innovation and the vaccine, whatever. The vaccine was actually 3 specific types of technologies that have been developed for 40 years, iteration after iteration after iteration, right? The machine learning and the deep learning, crystallography, next generation sequencing. These have all been things that have been around for years. And all of these things 40 years ago were funded probably by some form of governmental federal grant in whatever country. So there is a way to balance out. It's not that it's easy, but I think specifically what you guys are doing here is a great example of how does the government choose a specific target to innovate in and define it as a public good. Because yes, the government can do things that the private sector cannot. Merging between the two is complex, but it's also feasible, but that's a whole other monologue.
And I think there's...
I don't think I answered anything of your question.
No,
I tried.
No, but there's much more of an opportunity for certain countries over others. Because I think the model of pumping money into R&D, setting up research universities, these are, I think, well understood as being sort of good creators of that first phase of innovation. I think some countries have already drawn the lines around what is private, what intellectual property is privatizable. And I think this is the point that Yoav is getting at, right? And like, what intellectual property ends up sort of going into the public sphere. To the point where, say, if the United States wanted to redraw these lines, they can't. There is no political path towards saying, well, hey, GPS, the iPhone, all of these trillion-dollar companies are sitting on the backbone of sort of government-funded research, but we sort of drew the lines in a way that, like, a lot of the returns are privatized, a lot of the returns are captured privately. But I don't think we can redraw the lines anymore. I think that there are many countries in the world where that line is still taking shape. And so I think that's a really important point in terms of, not incentivizing innovation, but to the point you were coming to earlier, how do we make sure that the fruits of the innovation sort of are spread?
Government can, I think to your point, government can build the infrastructure for innovation in ways the private sector cannot. Like your example in Rwanda, I don't know Rwanda well enough, but like just setting up an infrastructure for protecting IP within Rwanda, I don't know if it exists or not. The infrastructure for payment processing that allows for fintech to flourish in Africa. These are things that are at an infrastructure level can create.
But I think there is a thing to say about the open sourcing of innovation. I think from a scientific point of view, it makes, the scientific method itself is all about peer review and opening it up to, more minds looking at the same issue and then trying to replicate experiments or maybe join with their own angle of things. But there is, again, that discourse where IP rights come into play. And then how do you draw the line between innovation for innovation's sake versus innovation that is then protected by the innovator so that they can benefit from it? So I think we're still trying to figure this out as
Isn't
international.
what lawyers are for? Isn't that what?
Yeah. We're still trying to figure it out. But I mean, I think you have a good experience when it comes to...
I'm enjoying the conversation so much I stopped to say what I think. I'll go back to the Airbnb example. I think a little bit unfair to the process, and I think I look at the Airbnb example as very similar to Uber, to social media, to a number of innovations that's happened in the last 20, 30 years, because it's setting up what you're saying, the infrastructure for innovation. It's allowing people to create their own services and experiences giving in the hands of millions of people. So it's not one big chain of hotels trying to figure out how to host 1 million people over the years. It's actually allowing people to create those user experiences. And I think that's very interesting. I wish we could do that with, I don't know, with coffee shops, with libraries, instead of doing big bookstores. Or how can we actually allow people to create community bookshops, coffee shops, community parks, grocery stores. So if you can give them a template, not as a franchise, if you can give them a template, can they Uberize this kind of experience? I think there's something about that when you involve people. So the incentive for the private sector is very clear, as you said, because they know that if you involve people, they know more than your entire team. You can build the design team, an innovative team, but always, every time you put the product into the environment will tell you more than you could find in a closed lab or process. For governments, not so much. So because again, few governments are doing it. They're doing this kind of sort of crowdsourcing policies, for example. They're also setting up different ways of monitoring user behavior, so that you've probably seen traffic lights where if it gets too congested, they slower the little, so the lights delay. If there's no traffic, it goes quicker. So that's basically based on responding to the user behavior as opposed to just being static. So for governments, it's the same thing. They need to be able to see, are people actually using the services we're putting out there? Can we learn from that? How do we involve people in advising what policies work better? So Uber and all these tech companies are ahead of that, because they know that it's better to create a hotel that's managed by millions of people than build one chain trying to figure out. And how this works, I think, also has influenced the big chain hotels to start doing these little boutique hotel. I won't mention the names. So there's another chain hotel that started creating these signature brands. And it was very interesting because you go from country to country, it used to be the same. So it was about seamless experience. The same hotel from Dubai to Cape Town, the same thing. If you're in South America, North America, the same thing. Now, every hotel feels a little local. So they're using local material, they're using a little local architects, they're doing something a little more contextualized, because they are realizing it's still managed by a big chain, but they're using local knowledge because they are realizing people are valuing that more. So I think this is interesting. Same thing with it's interesting with the Airbnb doing that. Same with the Uber. Yes, you're using the app, but you see the profile of a driver. They're rated by other users based on the experiences. The same way when you buy a book on Amazon, there's a connection with the local. Yes, I think this idea of a participatory economy, this collaborative process for innovation, it's something that needs to be encouraged. Not just by the tech companies, but also by governments, to really say this policy was actually invented by so-and-so. There should be names somewhere on the wall of a local farmer, a taxi driver, a grocery store contributed to this. There should be an e-policy, almost like a, what do you call it, suggestion box. Yeah. So that's really, I think that's the way to go in terms of involving people and creating this social infrastructure.
I think what we're touching upon is a lot of the responsibility between the private and the public sector to come together somehow for the sake of their locality. And that's all good and well, because we want innovation to thrive and we want people to champion it, whether it's the government or the private sector or both jointly. Yeah. But there are still global concerns and challenges that, for example, with the cleaning up of our oceans, I'm sure that scientifically speaking, there are technologies that exist that help, but no one is willing to fund it because it costs too much and there is no immediate ROI. So I will put the pressure on Mark here as a government servant, civil servant. What is Andorra doing to combat climate change? No, I'm just kidding. I kid. Yes. How do we?
In World Vision,
Yes.
World Vision, please.
Exactly. How do you bring that as part of your agenda? How do you even go about tackling global challenges and issues when it's not necessarily an immediate return or a benefit to the population or even the government or private business in Andorra?
Well, thank you for the question. It's actually the easiest question I ever have to answer. Actually, it's very difficult. We try to approach global challenges, but of course we are very, very small. It's our influence globally is not very high, but we try to do things lead by example. And to that end, we try to also promote innovation into the, how it's called, the four helix, quadruple helix model, involving not only academia, but also public sector, entrepreneurs, and also society. For example, we have this project in Andorra that you can also see in our pavilion, which is highlighted, where we try to come to make a climate change policy regarding solar panels into our roofs. Is it okay? We are not the most sunny country in the world, but we actually studied in a basic research project all the solar potential of the whole country's roof. Actually, we can do that because we are very small. We can study the whole potential in the whole roofs, and we put this knowledge into the hands of both the public sector and the private sector. How? For the public sector, it was a good way to know how can we adapt the subventions and the grants policies in order for families or households to implement changes in putting solar panels. For the private sector, private companies had an opportunity to know what was the profitability of installing solar panels in many houses and to adapt their business model into the market. And for people, for society, it was also a good tool in order to know the ROI of switching from fuel energy to solar panels. So this is the way that, for example, it's a good example to tackle how Andorra is trying to fight climate change in a local basis. Okay, we cannot know how to clean oceans. Actually, we are a landlocked
It was
country,
a joke.
so
I know you're a landlocked country. No, that's great that you are looking at what you can do. Even you're like the Sparta of Europe. You know, if people can follow your lead, if you're really doing that much and putting in effort
we try to mix not also academia, but also private sector and public sector in order to shape policies to impact people in their decisions. I believe that this is a very good example of how we try to impact with innovation, thinking of not only profitability, which also we think about the private sector profitability, but also to make an impact for the sake of innovation regarding sustainability.
That actually makes me think about, again, we talk about innovation as a technology, but innovation as application in business, where several companies that I know of here personally would go to companies that refuse to invest in solar panels because it's just a huge cost up front, and they tell them, we will invest in the solar panels for your building, and we will charge you a lower rate than you are currently paying for your electricity. And the way that they make their money back is they're getting solar energy for free, and they are getting paid a minimal amount, so it's a longer ROI, but it's an innovative way to have the greater good come through from a business perspective. So that made me think of that. I think we are a little bit over time, so what I will do now is I will just open the floor for questions from the audience, if anyone has any questions. You will get a chance to talk, but please, we'll hear a question first as well.
Ladies first.
Yes.
Hello to everyone. This is a question.
Yes, please.
I was very worried about the reflection that Javier did on the each time less people devoted to science, education, and women not entering or abandoning science. Do any of you, can any of you share any experience of how this could be balanced, how this could be improved? Because really looking, when you read, and I talk by my country rather than in general terms, about the budgets devoted to innovation, technology, and so on, growing up constantly. One who comes from the humanity field rather than the scientific field would think that a big part of this money would be devoted precisely to do science. So this is like something blurry, and it will be great if we could put some examples, positive examples. Thank you.
Positive, I hope. So the first thing I will do is by saying that rich countries invest in R&D because that's good for their economy. And by doing that, they create ecosystems, because innovation doesn't happen in the whole country. Actually, it happens in cities. And they do that because in those cities become like magnets for talent. That's the main reason people want to invest in R&D from the public sector, to create these kind of magnets for talent. Because that's what we are missing. We are missing talent, and that's the biggest competition. When you think about R&D or innovation, you can follow the money. That's a good indicator, the investment. But it's even better if you follow the people, where the smartest people are going. And when we think about innovation, and I'm not going to cite any cities or any universities, but we know where it's happening. So the competition for talent is amazing. And that's why it's so worrisome that we are getting so few scientists and also very few female engineers. Part of that is just culture, is history, the lack of role models. So one good example, and we are going to celebrate the International Day of Women and Girls in Science on February 11th, very soon. And all around the world, we are going to organize activities mainly to give a voice to women, to tell us why this career is fulfilling, why there is a role for women, and actually for everybody in science, because we need the brightest. That's the biggest competition. Of course, it's about patents. Of course, it's about resources, but it's mainly about the brightest minds. Yeah, and that's where we are lacking. And that's for the top. That's the top of the iceberg, the brightest. My second comment was about we are becoming a very technological society to understand of science. That's the so Carmen, if you are coming from humanities, that's perfect, and that's wonderful. But we all need to have some basic science understanding, because if not, if we are illiterate in terms of science, we are going to be manipulated. And that's very risky.
I'm very pessimistic about sort of the participation in basic science in general. Yeah. I have less to say about, I'm certainly I would love to see ways in which we could actively encourage women to enter science, but I don't have any good examples. But I think at the basic level, the competition for talent that you mentioned is part of the reason why the most, we're having a problem getting people into the basic sciences, right? Because people with those capabilities now can go and work on Wall Street.
Exactly.
They can go and look for Facebook and Google. A lot of basic scientists, people who would have studied basic science, are now studying computer science. A vast majority of PhDs in computer science don't go into research, they go into industry. Now, compounding that is the deep learning that Yoav mentioned, that is sort of it's a kind of AI technology that is progressively diminishing the value of sort of scientific structure to our solutions. like companies used to use mathematics to manage their inventory. Now they just feed a bunch of data into a machine learning system, and it tells them what to do without us understanding how it's being done. This has been happening in the biological sciences for 100 years, right? I mean, we create the drug before we understand how it works. It's sort of like, there's sort of this debt we're taking because sometimes we have these unintended consequences. And I feel like as a society, we are putting so much faith into these AI systems now that and they do such a good job also, right? To the point where in a generation, the incentive to go into basic science will be even less because these massive AI systems are able to give us the outcomes that we want without the sort of like, the development of the underlying science.
I will disagree with you.
Yes?
I will take the optimistic approach and answer your question from my lived experience and from my understanding of human psychology to begin with. So, COVID, the pandemic, has been great to show people that they cannot rely on corporations, right? A lot of people have been let go. The economic situation has forced people into trying to come up with ways for them to be independent from any kind of structural workplace, where the innovative solutions of how to actually survive come to the fore. And maybe because of my lived experience, again, from our country in the UAE, 60 to 70% of university graduates are female. And a lot of them are, well, I look at my children, my daughters, I look at my sister who is now doing her PhD in astrophysics at 23 years old, I believe. She went from bachelor to PhD immediately, and I think it's about us, this generation that's sitting here, to implant that curiosity. Because going into the sciences is a compromise. You have to not look at financial viability and making the best salary possible, but looking at how you can have a purpose, leave a legacy, do something for the benefit of humanity as a whole, or your society at least. Something like Amin is doing in Rwanda is not necessarily looking at how he can, deepen his pockets, but about how he can benefit the next generation of young kids in Rwanda. So I think it's a possibility. Again, I'm not too optimistic. I'm also realistic. It is a possibility, but it is our responsibility as individuals, as parents, as uncles, as aunts, as sisters, as brothers, to look at this new generation and really implant the seeds of curiosity that this is a noble pursuit. This is something that is worth your time, your energy, your effort, and possibly a lower salary than you would have gone if you went into business management or business administration. Again, I say we are in a lucky position as the UAE government does do what I would call legacy or horizon projects like the Mars mission or the UAE Space Agency or the Mohammed bin Rashid Space Center that allow people, young kids that are in high school, to look at STEM as a viable career path, not just, oh, I'm going to be a professor and that's the only option for me. If I become a PhD in any specific...
It's not too bad being a
It's not too bad, I agree. But it can be, if you look at other people that are, making 10x, 20x your salary as a professor, you would think, well, maybe I shouldn't have gone into the STEMs. But now that we have these flagship projects in the country, it actually opens up the door for people to be like, yeah, I can be an astrophysicist. I can go into research, not just for research's sake, but I can actually benefit this specific entity, this specific project that we're working on. So I am optimistic. Again, very realistic about the responsibility that is on my own shoulders, and I invite everyone here to really, any kids in your life, sit with them, talk to them, make sure they don't look at money as their goal in life and that's the be-all and end-all, but to look at science as a noble pursuit that will not only expand their knowledge and their own minds, but also to look at their societies and humanity as a whole.
I actually like the word curiosity and making sure everybody participates, not just scientists. I'm not overeager on just scientists alone having a seat at the table. I think it's important, but it's also important to have everybody who has a stake have a seat at the table. One example is that when we're trying to improve the wildlife and the management of the national parks, you realize that you have people that understand conservation, they understand the wildlife, but the people, the community, the farmers that live around the park have so many years of knowledge in terms of they've lived with the animals, they live with the park, so they understand that a little bit. But then there's another community, the people that used to poach the animals, that hunt the animals for livelihood. If you don't have them at the seat on the same table, you're not going to really, you don't know what you're missing. So scientists are important to have at the table. Local community mentioned something jokingly about how do you clean up the oceans. The fishermen, you find a lot of the fishermen have the knowledge and the technology. They've survived a lot of different things, lives in the sea. So we can bring in a scientist coming from the greatest university in the world, comes in with the tools, but if they don't integrate the social knowledge of the local community, they're missing something. So I'm more keen on the curiosity, going into a situation saying, look, we don't know what we don't know. Let's make sure that everybody who's been part of this process, whether from a lab across a different continent, whether by living in this community for 200 years, having generations, let's bring everybody together. So that includes women, includes scientists, includes educators, includes children. And the technology is important because it allows us to process the data quickly. So when you manage a park of thousands of hectares with hundreds of thousands of animals, you need technology to be able to monitor how everything is going, to be able to look at the climate, to be able to see what's going on. So all those things have layers of integration. But I get very skeptical when we become too oriented on one domain, or we need more tech in this department, we need more policy, we need everybody. It's just that we don't know how much role they will play, which is why I think by creating these platforms that we're saying that allows everybody to participate, to chip in, and then having the technology and the ability to process that quickly. What is everybody saying? That I think that's the way to go. So curiosity and making sure that everybody's participating, and we have the ability to assess the learning and the information that we are receiving, and as an ongoing process.
I think that speaks to what you were saying about the innovations, the 3 innovations. It's all about bringing people together.
Exactly. Yeah, and I would like to ask.
Sorry, Alia, I will let you. But Mark, I think you have to go.
Yeah, I'm very sorry. I have a live radio interview, and I really need to go. That
Popular
was
guy.
Wonderful to participate. Thank you very much for having me.
It was our pleasure. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Mark.
Yes, Alia,
Yeah, I
please.
would like to add here also, and for us to enhance the scientific capabilities, and even with the pipeline of the talent, we should, as you mentioned, we should here build an ecosystem that stimulates innovation, but at the same time also to allow for competition, to invite invite others, different categories here, whether they are private or any other categories, profit, non-profit, or governmental, different categories, depending on the qualifications of this, putting more consideration into the qualification of the teams and how they can really add value to the science. So I think it's very important to open for this competition, as we did in the UA Europe or the UA Research Program for Enhancement Science. We do work on the research part, but we also focus a lot on the competition phase at the beginning, and this gives a big chance it opens the floor for different categories to come, and you can get these great minds together. And then you can look into different solutions here, and you can find out how each one of them can be involved in this, in a very effective way, with the spirit of collaboration between them.
May I ask what you graduated in?
Okay, my graduation is in business sciences, but I have an 18 years experience, and I'm in the National Center of Meteorology.
Meteorology.
So, yeah,
that's your
working in
experience.
R&D, yeah, so working in R&D came after an 18 years of meteorological.
MashaAllah. I just wanted to use you as an example to say that we have hope.
Yes.
A woman, a young lady that is working in.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
So with that, I would like to actually invite you to, for those that don't know, the Executive Commissioner, I want to get your title right, the Executive Commissioner of the Spain Pavilion, Carmen Buena, is with us. And
Hello.
if you can say the final remarks, because we are out of time.
Well, I'll be very, very brief. First of all, I'm sorry because I could not attend the complete debate, which was for me much more interesting than the type of things that I have to do, but being executive has this type of problems, okay? In the name of Acción Cultural Española, which is a state agency in charge of organizing the participation of Spain in Expos, and in the name of the Spanish Pavilion, and in my own name, I want to transmit our gratitude, first of all, to Expo, to Federica and her team, to have make possible this debate, and to tell you that this was part of our project of participation in Expo from the beginning. Innovation has been one of our biggest interests, and we think that Expos have always been about innovation, and this was an opportunity that we should not miss, and from our country we have tried not to do so. We know that the problems and the diversity of situations are of great complexity, but it sounds, listening to you, that they are shared by all of us, which is part of the globalization. We share the problems, let's see if we can share the solutions. We have a variety of potential solutions, innovative solutions for sustainability, which is the area of Expo where our country chose to participate in our exhibition. I don't know if you had the chance of visiting it or not. If you didn't, we will be very happy to organize a visit to it. And well, we hope there are much more debates than continue and cross-seeding between the different countries, the different cultures that we are represented here, and all the ones who are listening to us or we are representing, even if we don't come from there. Thanks a lot to everyone, and welcome to the Spanish Pavilion.
Muchas gracias, Carmen. Thank you very much for your hospitality. We appreciate it. I would just like to thank the panel. Thank you very much for your time. This has been a very interesting conversation. It was for me. I hope it was the same for the audience here and online. And we will be around, so if anyone wants to speak to any one of us specifically, we'll be here for another 5 to 10 minutes at least. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.